Hi, welcome to a mini lecture on the Spanish conquest. Now, this is a lecture that really is one-sided and mostly focuses on the Spanish. This is a Spanish-centric lecture. But part of the reason why we're doing that and doing it quickly through a mini lecture is we're trying to figure out who the Spanish are, what will they bring with them to Mexico, and then, of course, how will that impact Mexico. So welcome to a mini lecture on the Spanish conquest. Feel free to pause the video as necessary, but this is a mini lecture on the Spanish conquest, even though it's much more complicated than this. And a matter of fact, the conquest is better described as a native revolt. We will be focusing primarily on the Spanish. Now, as a framing mechanism, I want to start off with a rudimentary Jared Diamond framing of guns, germs, and steel. That is, this conquest is better understood through European paradigms of guns, germs, and steel, or technology, better understood through God, glory, and gold, or motivational factors, and then the conquest better understood through violence at an individual, personal level. Why did they do what they did? Or did they enjoy it? And then personal conquest, right? This is again a mini lecture on the conquest, focusing on the Spanish to figure out who they are, what what type of culture do they have that impacts their behavior in Mexico? What do they bring with them, and then how will that impact Mexico? It's very important to note too. We're only primarily focusing within this 2-year time frame. Right, that is the primary thesis from the early spring of 1519 till August 31st, 1521. This lecture focuses on this first 2 years, and that's an important teaching criteria as well, which I'll talk about in the next couple slides. But it's important to understand that the story really begins in Cuba. It doesn't begin really in Spain. From Cuba to Cozumel, from Cuba to Cozumel to the Yucatan Peninsula, moving up the Isthmus, right, to modern day Veracruz, and then to the Valley of Mexico, where they land on where they finally reach Mexico-Tenochtitlan on November 8th, 1519. So that is the primary focus. Only 2 years, and then this is not an official Spanish expedition that's coming from Spain. This is an outlaw and a group of supporters that he moves with. And with that, let's move forward. So Spain has officially sent 2 expeditions to Mexico. The Cordoba expedition in 1514, then the Cordoba expedition in 1518. They return with news of Mexico and riches. Now, the most famous one and the most important is the number 3, Cortés, but this is crucial to understand. Cortés is not an official emissary or has no connection to the Spanish crown whatsoever. Spain doesn't know that he's there. This is an unofficial trip. This is not Spanish authorized. And a matter of fact, that if you read more, you'll learn he is an outlaw. He has been arrested in Cuba by the governor Velasquez. He finds his way out, probably by bribing the guards, and then he makes his way to collect men in order to leave Cuba, in order to follow these rumors of a Mexico filled with treasures. Cortés is not an official emissary, not an official trip from Spain. As a matter of fact, Cortés is really the primary investor, financial investor in this expedition. Right, like many men in Cuba, he was extremely bored. Much of the Caribbean had already been explored and exploited by the time that he arrived, and he was looking for action, again, as an outlaw, arrested by Cortés. I'm sorry, arrested by Velasquez, right? He is not an official um, army. He is a business investor. What explains their behavior? For Cortés, this is a business investment. Invested personally over 7,000 ducats into this expedition. He's paying uh, for some of the equipment, right? He's paying for some of the rationing, and he's paying for the boats as well. This is a business investment for Cortés. Now, nonetheless, I want us to consider his Christian upbringing. No matter what you think of this man or whatever his actions are, and we'll learn about those more later, he considered himself to be under the light of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And here's a quick quote: "Comrades, let us follow the sign of the Holy Cross with truth, faith, and through it we shall conquer." Again, he is an outlaw. He is leaving from Cuba. No matter what he does, part of the answer is that he considers himself a Christian. And when he maims and kills, part of that reason is because that's his way to express his Christianity. So who are the people that go with them? They are not, Cortés is not an official leader. The men are not officially soldiers. Right? They are acting on their own behalf. They're not soldiers. They are adventurers. They are thrill seekers. They're criminals. They're people who are bored in Cuba and looking for action, and that's what they signed up for, and they're more than happy to go with Cortés. Also crucial to understand that they buy their way in. What does that teach you? When we send an army to across the world, we don't expect our soldiers to pay for their weapons or pay for their food, pay for their tanks. Right? They have been vetted into a process in this country, as in most countries. That's not what these people are going through. These are people that are paying their own way into, they're buying their own supplies, they're buying their own weapons, right? And that is the best way to describe this group of people that go from Cuba to Mexico. They're thrill seekers, right? They're not an official um, army. However, several years ago, I had a student raise their hand and go, "Excuse me, isn't that pretty much what a pirate does?" And I paused for a second. I go, I thought it was a brilliant statement. What are pirates? How do pirates get paid? They only get paid by what they steal, as opposed to an army gets paid by their government. Pirates only get paid what they steal, and that is the same for these first group of Spanish. Right? They are not official. There is no paycheck waiting for them in Spain. Spain doesn't even know they're there for a while. On paper, I would hate for my students to leave thinking that these people are pirates, even though on paper it very much seems like they are. They only get paid by what they take, and that partly explains their actions. Now, be clear, this is strict military order that's going on, even though they're not an official army as well. Now, let's talk about what they bring with them, and part of that is their culture of religion. The Iberian Peninsula has a thorough history of religious conquest. From the time of the Romans, and probably even more important, is the time of Muslims. For 700 years, for nearly 700 years, the Muslims had ruled the Iberian Peninsula. The last Muslim city of Granada was driven out in 1492. What you should learn from this is that religious fervor and religious fighting for religion and killing in the name of religion is nothing new to people from Iberia or from the Iberian Peninsula. It is part of their normal culture there. Now, another thing worth noting is that when Spain ruled Muslims, when the Muslims ruled Spain for nearly 700 years, the Muslims allowed other religions to worship as they saw fit. There was tolerance by the Muslims. They believed they had to pay a fee, but Muslims did not persecute um, other religions during their rule. When the Christians took over, what you have is a great intolerance of one religion versus other religions. There's religious persecution of Jews, Muslims, and any other non-believers. On the right, you see an image of the torture of Jews in 1475. What you have as part of their history is a history of religious intolerance, and the Inquisition is just one of those examples, right? The attempt to end or the inquire to end a heresy. Right? After 700 years, multiple generations of religious fighting, the Inquisition is just another brick in the wall, if I can quote Pink Floyd, of their religious intolerance. And in the Iberian Peninsula, the central choices that you have is to believe in Christianity, to leave, or to be killed. Now, this is paramount when understanding the Spanish conquest, because how would the Spanish treat Mexicans? They would treat Mexicans in the same way that they treat Muslims, as the other. They are xenophobes, right? Anything that is other than what I am is an enemy, according to this philosophy, if you will. There's multiple answers of why they do what they do in Mexico, but one of those is the religious intolerance. Now, quickly, we'll talk about weapons. Superior weapons, armor and steel, and the rapier's sword, the crossbow, the arquebus, cannons, and probably more technical, the falconets, which is the smaller one. Horses, I like to call those medieval tanks. If you got a horse charging at you that weighs 900 pounds, it's going to do some damage. But the one that I do want to spend a little more time on is dogs. What does it teach you about the Spaniards that that the Europeans in general, Spain specifically, is training dogs to disembowel people? Right? These are amazing creatures that could be trained to do whatever you want. In this case, they're being trained to eat human flesh. Right? We'll be talking about mastiffs and then greyhounds, but I think most of this is really this lecture is really focusing on the mastiffs. Right? Now the next couple of images are actually from Caribbean. But you can get a sense of the horrors and just how bad it must have been to be a native encountering something like that. How do you defend yourself against that? Exactly, you don't. You can't. So these weapons of war again are very effective, but I'm really using this as a teaching tool. What does this teach you about their owners? Dogs that bite people, are they bad dogs? Or does it teach you more about the owners? And that's what we're looking at. Here's another Caribbean account. The soldiers loosed the dogs to rip open limbs and bellies, chase fleeing Indians into the bush to score them on sword and pike, and with God's aid, killing many Indians. Right. One of the Caribbean nicknames that the Spanish had for natives was dog food. You think when the Spanish came, they brought barrels of dog food with them? Alpo, puppy chow? Native Americans became the dog food. That is one of the nicknames the Spaniards gave them. So, the use of dogs in European cultures, and now that European culture being brought into the Americas, is an extremely valuable teaching tool for us. It explains who they are and why they behave in that manner. This mastiff weighs up to 200 pounds, and I think he benches about 500. He also does, anyways. Formidable animal, and if you train them to eat people, they do amazing work, right? Now look at these vicious killers. I mean, it's just unbelievable. What does this teach you? Are these natural born killers? Are they prone? Can these dogs be trained to do anything else? Now, in world history, dogs are often used, or still used today. Here we have an image of Abu Ghraib, and just Standing Rock, right? So this is up to this day, dogs have still remain an amazing weapon to put down the other side. Now, as we return back to the lecture, and you see the Spanish moving in from Veracruz, as they pick up hundreds of thousands of allies. One of the points I want to talk about is their Tlaxcalans or their Tlaxcatecas allies, and then what occurs at Cholula. Right. Well, first, a brief description of the Spanish as they march in again from Cozumel to the Yucatan, all the in through Veracruz and then Mexico, is that they are essentially killing most of the groups. Many battles as they encounter, they will turn those into allies. By the time they reach Mexico-Tenochtitlan, they would have amassed a formidable group of allies. As they are doing that, they are spreading their religion. Cortés brings priests with him during this illegal expedition, um, destroying Mexican idols. Right, as they kill people, they proclaim it in the name of the Lord. Right, as they destroy Mexican icons, they proclaim it in the name of the Lord. As they erect crosses, they do it in the name of God. And as they baptize people, right, they do it in the name of God. And as they carve trees into the Virgin Mary, they do it again with their sense of Christian duty. Right, before they kill people, they pray. Right, and after they kill people, they pray. Whatever you think about the Spanish, they deem themselves religious stalwarts, and they deem themselves to doing a Christian's job. Again, you can decide whether that's right or wrong, but they absolutely believe that they are on the side of the Lord, and what they are doing is bound by doctrine. And if you please pause this and read the requirement. It's a legal mumbo jumbo that's told to natives, but I'll read the highlighted part that Spanish would say. I certify to you that with the help of God, we shall powerfully enter into your country and shall make war against you in all ways and manners that we can, and shall subject you to the yoke and obedience of the church and of their highness. We shall take you and your wives and your children, and we shall make slaves of them, and as such shall sell and dispose of them as your highness may command, and we shall take away the goods, and shall do all the mischiefs and damage as we can. Perhaps one of the greatest quotes that students always quote under their exam is a quote from Hernando Cortés when he first encounters actual Mexicas in the port town of Veracruz. He says, "We Spaniards suffer from a disease of the heart which only gold could cure." That's corroborated by different evidence. And another native account, according to Broken Spears, is the natives accounting how the Spanish behave. This is about the Spanish. And they were given these presents of gold, quetzal feathers, and golden necklaces. The Spaniards burst into smiles. Their eyes shone with pleasure. They were delighted by them. They picked them. They picked up the gold and fingered it like monkeys. They seemed to be transported by joy. as if their hearts were illumined and made new. The truth is that they know that they longed and lusted for gold. Their bodies swelled with greed, and their hunger was ravenous. They hungered like pigs for the gold. This is a mini lecture, but I think it's becoming pretty clear what the Spanish were really their number one motivation. Now, as they're marching closer to Tenochtitlan, apart with their Tlaxcalan allies, they massacre 6,000 men, women, and children. The Cholulans are allies of the Mexica. As they arrive in Tenochtitlan, they steal more gold within the palace of Oxio, which is his. I'm blanking out. It's either his dad's palace, right? Their real motivation is revealed as they tear down the walls in order to seek and find actual gold. What do they do with these gold artifacts? Melt it down so they can easier transport as gold bars. Another massacre, another massacre by the Spaniards against native, in this case, the Mexica, in the sacred precinct of Mexico-Tenochtitlan. Another more massacres. Cortés, as he scours the central valley of Mexico, burns people alive, right? And another example, Cortés kills 2,000 men, but he forced 4,000 women and children to watch the killings. So as we start to end this incredibly short mini lecture, you only get a taste of what influences the Spanish and how they behave once they're in Mexico. This quote very revealing as we end this lecture. Before the final siege of Tenochtitlan, before tens of thousands of people were killed, Cortés leads a prayer. The principal reason for us coming to this part is to glorify and preach the faith of Jesus Christ, even though at the same time it brings us honor and profit. And there it is, the Holy Trinity of Cortés, the full trifecta of God, glory, and gold. And as this final siege occurs, the siege of Tenochtitlan for 3 months, they will starve out and kill tens of thousands of men, women, and children, right, as they ransack the Central Valley and the town surrounding Texcoco. Again, this is a Spanish-centric lecture, but it is important to note that who is doing the fighting? 90 to 99% of the soldiers actually doing the fighting are natives, Mexican. This is a native revolt against the most powerful entity in Mexico at the time, the Mexica. And this meme sums up best, right? Cortés bribing and cajoling and tricking and forcing people to join his coalition against the Mexica. In true fashion, after the war is over, Cuauhtemoc surrenders, and the first thing that Cortés tells him is, I hope you're well. Are you okay? And the second thing that he tells him is, where's the gold? Cuauhtemoc tells him that you took it all, which they did. He doesn't believe in, and Cortés orders Cuauhtemoc's last Aztec emperor feet to be oiled and then set on fire. Which brings us to the last section of this lecture. Smallpox. What was another very important manner of the Spanish conquest? What else do they bring with them? Unknowingly, they bring smallpox with them. And smallpox is an amazing disease that's going to wreak havoc in Mexico. Here's the quintessential before photo, and then there's the after with smallpox. right? So smallpox is an amazing disease. It will kill about 40% of Central Mexicans within 1 year, and it would wreak havoc for centuries as the American genocide continues. Thank you for joining us on a mini lecture of the Spanish Conquest. Please learn and read more.